Hello, everybody. This is Bruce from Oregon with the Bruce from Oregon Show. This is episode 0. It could be the first, it could be the last. We will have to watch and find out. Today, aside from the nice photos of moose that I have up on the screen, we are going to be talking episode 2 of my Management Best Known Practices series, or as we like to call them where I work, BKMs, Best Known Methods. Basically, where you try to figure out the best way someone has figured out how to do something and then copy that idea so that you can do something very efficiently and effectively as well. So today we're going to get into the topic of prioritizing your work, managing your time in order to better prioritize and accomplish the tasks that you want to do, and some strategies for how to deal with things that want to derail you from properly prioritizing and accomplishing your work. So let's get into it. This hopefully won't be the longest video ever, but we'll have a few good high-quality tips packed in here. So let's say goodbye to the moose, and we're going to go to the definition of the word prioritize. Okay, so prioritize is a verb, and it means to designate or treat something as more important than other things. Okay? Now, the important thing to note here in this definition that I want to point out first and foremost is that when we are prioritizing among multiple things. So we are designating or treating something as more important than other things. Other things here implies that there is more than one thing. So if somebody that you work with, maybe it's your manager, maybe it's someone important with a fancy title, maybe it's just one of your coworkers or someone you don't even know, and they ask you to prioritize one thing, the important thing to keep in mind here is that that is a non sequitur. It doesn't make sense to prioritize only one thing. If you make a list and the list only has one thing on it, there's no way to increase its priority. There's no way to decrease its priority because there's only one thing. The only way the word prioritize as a verb makes sense is if there are explicitly more than one thing on the list. Okay, so when someone says, "Hey, everybody, I have an important meeting on the calendar now. Please prioritize this meeting." At best, that is a non sequitur sentence because the person has given you one meeting. They have not told you what else that this meeting should be more important than, and what else this meeting should not be more important than. So they have failed at their job of using language properly in order to efficiently and effectively get work done. So keep that in mind. If you ever see somebody say, "Please prioritize this one thing," whether that's some work that has to happen, or a meeting, or anything. It is a non sequitur at best. I believe subconsciously, without knowing it, what these people are trying to do is they are trying to sort of persuade other people to do what they want instead of doing what they don't want you to do, or what might be somebody else's job, or what might be alternate deliverables from your job. So in effect, what people are subconsciously doing without even realizing it when they say to prioritize one thing is that they are trying to intimidate you. They are trying to bully you into doing what they want first before you do anything else, even when they don't even know what else you have on your list. So keep that in mind and deal with it appropriately. Now, when you go to work and you have a list of things to do, what you want to do is document this list and then prioritize it. And it can help to sometimes prioritize this with your team lead or your manager or with somebody else on your team. And just say, "Look, this is the way I think the priority should be for these 5 or 6 items. Do you agree?" And this way you can get some manager, team lead, stakeholder input on whether you've prioritized this list properly or not. So that is the correct way to prioritize a list of items that you want to do while you're working on a task. Okay. So now that we've deep dived into the word prioritize. Let's take a look. I just looked up at prioritize your work, and there was this nice teamwork.com link that came up as sort of the first response from Google. And they say, how do you prioritize tasks effectively? Start by creating a comprehensive task list and identifying deadlines. That's right. So sometimes it's very difficult to figure out when the deadline for something is because we might not know yet. The other thing I've seen is that sometimes it's very hard to predict a deadline. We might have an idea of what the deadline might be. Well, we have to get these 6 things done by a particular project milestone. But maybe as the project progresses, things change and the milestone changes, or maybe the requirements change. Um, so you kind of have to keep looking at the task list and identifying deadlines on a regular basis. What I like to do is every Monday morning, I like to apply the adage from Stranger Things. Mornings are for coffee and contemplation. So what's real nice if you can do it on your calendar, and maybe Monday doesn't work, but sometime every single week, go through my to-do list or my task list and just make sure it's up to date. Note when I've completed things. So I have a running list of things I've done so that at the end of the quarter or the end of the year or the end of the month, I can look back and I know everything I did. I don't delete it off the to-do list. I move it to the done list. Never delete anything. Just move it to the right place. And then when you're going through that list, say it's Monday morning, you're having your coffee, maybe some cold brew, and you can try and figure out, what are the deadlines associated with each item? Some things you're just trying to get done this quarter. Some things maybe they're opportunistic, and it's like, as long as we get something, here's something we want to do opportunistically for sometime this year. Other times there are hard deadlines. There's a meeting in 2 weeks, and we have to make a spreadsheet before the 2 weeks are up. So sometimes you have deadlines that you can figure out. In lieu of deadlines, the other thing I'll do is I will split my to-do list into more like, what are the things I'm going to do sooner rather than later? So if you don't know solid deadlines quantitatively, you can at least qualitatively split your to-do list up into different levels. Maybe it's 2 levels, maybe it's 3, of when you're going to do these things or when you intend to do these things. Then they say assess the importance, urgency, effort, and resources required from each one. Well, this is a lot of attributes. And if you're literally creating a to-do list and you want to sort of quantify all of these attributes, that's kind of a lot of work. If you have large enough tasks that you're working on, it may be that your manager needs to help you doing this next level breakdown of these items. And if you are a manager, I think what is good is tracking the work of your team to the point where large tasks, maybe, if you have quarterly objectives, maybe you go 1 click down and there are things that your team has to do. Write some code, write some PowerPoint, finish debugging something, whatever it may be. And as a manager, what you are going to want to do is you're going to want to understand that list for your whole team using some sort of work tracking system. This could be a list in OneNote, or you could make use of more advanced tools like a planner tool or a Jira tool or some sort of task management database tool that might be proprietary, and use a few of these attributes. Now, what I'm going to recommend, if you're a manager and you're managing a team and you're tracking this work, don't try to track too many quantitative attributes all the time, because what will happen is you will just fall behind on keeping all these attributes up to date in your work tracking system, and you will just abandon the work tracking system. You'll just stop doing it. So keep it very, very simple. Generally, what I like to know in a work tracking system for my employees is a very crude priority level, like maybe high, medium, and low. Or maybe there's a showstopper and then like higher priority and lower priority, and that's it. Like 3 levels, nothing more than that. Um, and then they have an urgency column, which I think goes with the priority column and the importance column. I just merge all that together into one field. Um, Urgency can sometimes be reflected in when you have the to-do list and you do know, oh, we need to get this one thing done by, you know, the end of August. Okay. So you do kind of have an ETA in there. If I know something like that and it's very precise, that's typically a small amount of the work we do. Usually we're working on quarterly objectives. Usually the objectives have very specific dates sometimes for things that are happening in a week or so. So you don't even need to write it down in a team-based work tracking system. The employee or yourself can know that, oh, we have to have this done by next week. So I really don't find ETA fields in work tracking systems to be too important. If I do know, for example, we got to get something done by the end of the quarter or the end of August or whatever it is, I might put that in the description of the work item itself. That way I'm not worried about updating some fancy field across, 20, 30, 40 items in a database somewhere, because then your brain just checks out and you give up. Same thing with effort. I think from a lot of like software scrum type of methodologies, they try to get people to figure out how much manpower it takes to get something done. And it's really hard to estimate these things. And I don't think it's worth it. I think if you want to sort of analyze your team's to-do list, maybe on a quarterly basis or something, you could just say, there's high effort and low effort. I would really try to have as few categories for these attributes as possible, because you're not going to want to manage a ton of dimensions of data, because the cross products will get real crazy real fast. And we'll talk about that more at the end of the video with some ideas there. And then resources required for each one. So for my team, it's typically like who is assigned to the task. And this doesn't even have to be the person that's going to be assigned to it full time. It could be, I need somebody to triage this and then decide whether we work on it or someone else works on it or whether we delegate to someone else. So at a minimum, what I like to have is the title of the work item, the description of the work item, accrued priority level, and assign it. And there may be a tag that you need for your work in terms of a domain-specific attribute. So for example, if I'm managing a team and the team is working on 3 different, silicon projects, CPU development projects that we're doing, I may tag those work items with one of those attributes that's domain-specific to the job we're doing. That's about as far as I'm going to go in a work tracking system or a to-do list or something that I'm going to help my employees prioritize, or to prioritize my own tasks and work as well. They say then prioritize your list based on the most urgent tasks, considering dependencies and breaking down complex tasks if necessary. So this is pretty good. They're basically saying like work on the high priority stuff first. The only thing I will say is you need to work with your manager very carefully. Or if you're a manager, you need to think about this, because this is really written from the perspective of an individual contributor doing a job. I have 3 high priority things. I need to do those first before I think of doing anything else. Okay, that's what the employee is going to be thinking. Now, here's the problem. When you're in a corporate setting, and you ask, like, what are the organization's priorities? They're just going to look at the roadmap for the projects that you have and say that the nearer term projects, the projects that are closer to completing, are more important than the ones that are in development or in planning or in pathfinding or something like that are further out. That's inherently what they're going to do. So this is, the tyranny of the urgent is the pitfall we need to watch out for. So for example, I was running a team where we had products in development and we had tasks that we had to accomplish for these near term, very close to customer ship or product launch type of timelines that we just had to have resources on. In parallel, at the same time, my team was working on technology development that would not show up in our product until, further down the road. Okay. But we needed to do technology definition We needed to do research and development, R&D, on this new technology at a very particular point in time, because if we did not, the rest of the industry was going to finish this work and move on, and we would have no say in the matter. We wouldn't understand the technology. We wouldn't be able to influence the technology. So we had to have somebody on that project, basically full time, for a certain number of quarters at the exact same time that we had other projects where we were facing the tyranny of the urgent. And so, as a manager, it was my job to make sure that I had basically created a separate priority category for this technology pathfinding work. And I had to protect the employee that was working on that project, as well as my own time to work on that project, from the tyranny of the urgent. So if you blindly follow, the corporate priority list, or if you blindly follow the personal, I have a to-do list and I'm only going to do the high priority things first, high priority things will keep coming in. You will never get to the strategic objectives. You will only work on the tactical objectives. And then further down the road, it might not be today, but sometime in a few quarters, in a few years, you will not have invested in the places you needed to invest in the past. So that is my advice there. As a first level or even a second level manager, you need to be thinking, how do you create and isolate different categories of priorities from each other and not just blindly think of a global priority list? Okay. Now, in terms of, let's go back to how do we, figure out urgent tasks or dependencies or minimize the number of attributes we're using for classifying tasks when we prioritize them. So there's this cool tool. We'll go over to it here. I got it on Wikipedia, but there's other articles you can read on the internet. But this is called the Eisenhower method or the Eisenhower principle. And what we're going to do is we're going to break tasks into one of four categories and try to think about these four categories whenever we're looking at our to-do list. Like if we're having our cold brew coffee on a Monday morning, we're going to look at our to-do list and we're going to think about this Eisenhower grid of four categories in the back of our mind, okay? So that's what we're going to do. So we've got the Dwight D. Eisenhower quote here. I have two kinds of problems, the urgent problems and the important problems. The urgent may or may not be important. The important may or may not be urgent, okay? So what you get when you figure out these two binary categories for these two dimensions is you get a grid. There are tasks that are urgent, and there are tasks that are not as urgent. There are tasks that are important, and there are tasks that are not as important. And so we try to evaluate our task list with these criteria. And they give some good examples here in this list on Wikipedia. So if you find an item in this urgent and important box, these are things that sort of have to be done right away. Maybe a crisis or a imminent deadline or a big problem that you've just discovered. So, okay, we found a bug in our code. We need to go fix the bug. Oh, a machine is broken. We need to repair the machine in the factory right away. Now, hopefully, if things are managed well and there's good workplace practices, the number of items in this quadrant should be fairly low. You might have a few every quarter, and I would consider that to be good. If you are in a situation where these things in quadrant one are happening multiple times a week, multiple times a month, that is where upper level management really needs to take a hard look at how they are running the organization. And do they have good processes and documentation and good planning in place and the right people hired to make sure that the number of things that fall into task lists in this quadrant stays at a minimum? You can never eliminate this box. There will always be things that fall into this box. But what you want to aim for is like once a month, maybe something like this happens. And I know you're all going to say, you're all out there laughing right now and saying, this happens to me 3 times a day. I understand, but we have to have goals that we want to attain, and we have to try and make our organization stronger and more effective in order to get to those goals. So we have to know what the goal is. I understand you may not be there right now. I know where I work, it's not like that right now, but That's the goal. Number two is where we have important items that are not urgent. So, like my example before, uh, with the uh, with the technology development, the technology development was not imminently urgent from the upper level management perspective. Okay, because we weren't going to use this technology for a year or 2 years or something like that, but we had to define it right now. So it was very important. Okay, so these type of tasks um, are really this is really where you want most of your tasks to fall. Like, you don't want to do things that don't matter. You want to do things that matter, so they're going to be important. But you don't want to do things at the last second. You want your work to be planned properly, uh, with your manager, with your team lead, with the organization, with a product roadmap or something like that. You want really good planning. So this one, and I think this is why they made it green, but this is really where you want most of your things that you're working on to fall. Okay. And then number three, now we get down into the row where things are unimportant. Okay. And it's kind of like you don't really want to be doing unimportant things, but I don't know. There's what do they put in this first category? It's unimportant but urgent. Okay, so somebody wants you to do something right now, but you feel it's not very important. Maybe, and it doesn't just mean you should never do it. Maybe the unimportant is like an enhancement. Like, oh, I could make my team's life, a click better if we did this enhancement to one of our tools. Okay. Maybe it's not super important for the product you're about to ship to a customer, but it could make your life a little bit better. So it's kind of an enhancement instead of just being completely unimportant or unnecessary. Um, these are things that, yeah, they could be delegated. So if you have a 5-person team and somebody has some spare time, maybe they work on one of these enhancements. Um, the other examples they give here are interruptions, meetings, and activities. I mean, yeah. So one thing I recommend to employees is, at least where I work, you can get a lot of meetings thrown at your calendar the longer you're there. Like when you're a new employee, you're going to have a regular meeting with your manager. You might have a regular team meeting. There might be a technology meeting. You might have 3 meetings on your calendar for an entire work week. And that's amazing. Like if you can keep that up, that's amazing. But a lot of times your whole calendar will be full with random stuff that you kind of have to go through. And this is another thing I like to do Monday morning. I like to look at my calendar, go through the whole week, and figure out what I'm going to go to and what I'm not going to go to. Okay. So this could include meetings or other activities where it's not completely necessary for my job. Now, if my to-do list is kind of short and there's a meeting where I'm going to go learn something new I didn't know before, maybe I'll attend that or I'll plan to attend it and cancel if I get busy. Okay, that's great because you can learn something new. But there are often meetings. I go to a lot of meetings where I see people on the attendee list and they're just sitting there in silence and then the meeting's over and they leave. And I'm like, why were they here? Like, you don't need to have meetings with all those people. If you are not getting some information that you absolutely have to have to do your job, or doing something in the meeting that actually gets work done, like we need to fill out a spreadsheet with important information in the meeting. Okay. I go to a lot of meetings where people talk about work. I don't want to go to those meetings. I want to go to meetings where we do the work. I want to create something. Let's write the code or review the code in the meeting. Let's create the spreadsheet in the meeting. Let's edit the PowerPoint slides in the meeting. I don't want to just talk about things. I want to do things. And if you're not doing that in a meeting that's on your calendar, get the heck out of it. Just go away. Like if someone really, really needs you for a single question, they might IM you and you can go answer the one question and then leave again. And then you've only spent 2 minutes instead of a whole hour. Okay. So you have to figure out at the beginning of the week what you're going to delegate or get rid of or chop off your to-do list or your calendar for this quadrant of things. And then, of course, the fourth quadrant is unimportant and not urgent. And these could be time wasters. Oh, they say pleasant activities. I mean, maybe, I don't know if it's too bad to spend some time on pleasant activities, but I don't know what that means. But or they say trivia. Yeah, I've been to a lot of meetings where people just want to complain about stuff, and it's like, look, I understand. We can figure out what the problems are, but if we're not going to do something with that list of what the problems are, then we've wasted our time. We need to actually do something instead of just go to a meeting and complain all day while we sip our coffee. That's kind of trivial. So this is another category where we can look for things that are time wasters. One way I like to look at this is I like to look at if something we are doing is a best known practice, then it's probably good. If it's an evolutionary solution to a problem, in terms of like, well, we usually do XYZ to debug, or we do XYZ to create something new, and that's a good practice, and we can use that practice for something new, then that is going to win. If we have to invent a completely new solution for something, instead of just using a methodology we've used before, I would call that a revolutionary solution. And sometimes revolutionary solutions are required. So for example, if we're building a product and there's a brand new technology and we have to invent something so that we can use that new technology, that would be a revolutionary solution. As long as that's the only way to get that thing to work. If you have two competing solutions for any task, two competing solutions for any product, one is evolutionary and one is revolutionary, 99% of the time, the evolutionary solution is better, and it is what you should do, because there's no reason to reinvent the wheel and waste your time developing something brand new that you've never developed before. You don't know what any of the cons are going to be. You don't know what the pitfalls are. You don't know what the glass jaws are. It's just the grass looks greener on the other side of the fence. So you want to invent something new versus using something that's already been proven. This is a time waster, and you need to put it in that fourth column or the fourth box and get rid of it. That's my advice there. So utilize the Eisenhower box. Spend some time every week. Maybe it's Monday morning, maybe it's some other time. I mean, some people like to do this at the end of the week so that they can go enjoy their weekend and then their next week's all planned out. Whatever works for you. Prioritize your tasks effectively. Work with your manager to make sure your manager is doing the job of across the team figuring out the urgency and the resources required, who's going to work on what. And then keep in mind the definition of the word prioritize. If somebody tells you to just prioritize one thing, it doesn't make any sense. That's a non sequitur. Don't let people tell you non sequiturs to your face. That's an insult. They can do better, and we can do better, and we can do a more effective job of managing our work and having a good time at our jobs so we don't get burnt out or frustrated or overloaded with the tyranny of the urgent. This is Bruce from Oregon. This is my video number 2. I'll see you next time for more management best known practices. Have a good one.